Welcome to this week's news program. I'm your host and editor, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. To help me with this week's news is my co-anchor, Mr. Kevin Berglund. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, today we are going to follow up on last week's report when we were doing an update on the communications department in the city of Maplewood. And as we've been covering on these news programs, the communications department in Maplewood has been focusing mainly on not communicating with the residents about what is going on at City Hall, but to tell the story, the spin, the sound bites of City Hall to manufacture the news they want you to believe, not what really happens. Now, we have identified something that when we first did this report, we were not aware of. But we have discovered that not only has Maplewood hired an individual to craft and make the message for the public officials to communicate to the public when they're out and about speaking with people, but as it turns out, Ramsey County has done much the same when it comes to their bus rapid transit that is going to be going up and down the Bruce Vento Trail, decimating the ecological trail. So we have, to start our news program, a couple of clips from a recent meeting, the advisory committee meeting, where they had their PR guy giving them instructions on how to craft and create the message when they're in the community talking with the residents. Let's take a look at our first clip.
That's what we want to, when we think about those key messages, they're those concise, nicely formed thoughts that include a value and that tie together the value of what you're talking about with the value of what your audience is looking for. So kind of the message construct that we use and we think about when we do things is values, challenges, vision, and solution. So this is, I'd say, write this down if you can, and then think about this, and we'll come back.
This is from the Rush Line Advisory Committee meeting of July 25th, 2019. Now, Mr. Berglund, you were there. You were there as a reporter from Put Your Hands Together Productions filming this. Were you surprised to find that they had somebody who was presenting to the elected officials how to craft a message on how to talk about the BRT?
And of course, it is always shocking to find that it's so strategically set up, because they will tell you they're interested in community conversation, they're interested in taking input, they're interested in knowing if the public, what their thoughts are on this, I guess, where it is to be run down, the route, how they are to set it up, the environment around it, the trees, the sidewalk, the fence. They continually put that impression out that they're looking for information. Of course, the way forward for them is really the opposite. They've already figured everything out, and all they're trying to set up is a message to deceive and misinform the public, and hopefully start digging ground before the public catch wind of what really is going on.
Right, and so in essence what you're saying is that they're trying to rework really what is the public sentiment. The public's not for this.
Correct.
And so they are trying to craft a message to present that it's the opposite of that.
Absolutely.
That this is something that is meeting a value, as you heard him. Well, we got to start with the value of the community. That's what we got to look at. what's the value of the community that this is going to support? So we need to focus on that. He also talked about how to listen to what people's comments were and then to use that later in crafting your message. Basically, how to address the objections so that their message is always going to be fluctuating based upon the objections they hear.
Absolutely. And I don't think they're ever going to meet any objections, because I've yet to find a person who lives around the route or in the near area of the route that is for it. So there's a way to try to find some sort of message. The Ramsey County is trying to find some sort of message that it either wears out or diffuses the people. And they just say, I know what you're telling me is most likely false, but I just don't have the energy to pursue it.
Right, because they've got the message creator.
Right.
Well, now let's continue as he gives them more tips.
Values of the communities along the line? What are the values of the region? What are the values of, that relate to the rush line? What are the challenges? Challenge words are, words like isolation, or an inability to get to a job, or, difficulties getting to healthcare. So, those are some of the challenges that people face, and challenges that.
So he's looking at isolation. I don't know how that figures into their message for the BRT. This issue about getting to health care, I think there's very few people who will use the BRT to get to health care. And certainly very few people are going to use the BRT to get to work, because those people who are inclined to use it to get to work currently use the express bus that runs parallel to this very same route. The express bus that it runs down Highway 61. So
Right.
Those are the people that are inclined to use this to get to work.
And of course, if he wants to talk about challenges in this area, the challenges are in the area that they have crime, which is rising, taxes, which is rising, jobs in the neighborhood that are low paying or non-existent. Maplewood Mall is failing. The housing is not, the housing value for all practical purposes isn't going up. These are the challenging, I don't know what challenges, I don't know where they came up with the big challenge in that area is getting to healthcare.
Or isolation.
Right.
Well, let's continue as he talks about this idea of a stool.
And lastly, I would say, once when we do all of that, then I like to think about the message supports. So you have kind of your overall key message, you have your umbrella concept, your single overriding communication objective that you are discussing and going back to. But then you have message supports underneath that, and I think of that as a three-legged stool.
So we've got the three-legged stool concept. And the reason I'm bringing all of this up from this meeting and this individual who is giving guidance to the Rush Line Advisory Committee on how to work the message and sell the concept of the BRT is because then we're going to jump to the presentation by Maplewood's communications director, and you will see the parallels between the two of how government messaging is being used on the public without the public actually identifying that they're being sold a bill of goods. But let's continue.
There are stories, so stories are anecdotes, and try to think of those as stories of individuals, stories of people, not big broad stories, but try to personalize. Think of those stories of people who are impacted and how what you're working on can change their lives. Statistics, so these are all S's. Stories, statistics, and with statistics, again, make the numbers personal or relatable. So when you talk to people about billions and billions of dollars, it just kind of it's hard to fathom, it's hard to gather. try to relate those down to a person or a family or a business or a nonprofit or an organization, bring those down to a place that is, understandable for folks. And then the third S in the three-legged stool S, stories, statistics. The third one is sound bites. So have sound bites that carry the message through.
So we've got the 4 S's: stool, stories, statistics, and sound bites. Wow, that's the 4 S's of government propaganda. So with that in mind, let's turn to the Maplewood City Council meeting where Joe Sheeran, the director of the communications department, is talking about his department and what they've been doing. Now, where we left off last time, he was talking about what a great job they did promoting the sale of trees in the city of Maplewood. Now, of course, why the communications department is involved in the selling of trees when we have a nature center that could be doing that, when we have a Parks and Recreation department that can be doing that, when we have an environmental department that could be doing that. But instead, they have the communications department hot on the trail of selling trees. So let's take a look at that clip.
Instrumental in the first ever tree marketing. We did a good job of trying to, we had a goal, and we were working to get that goal. And then one of the big takeaways from internally, our employees wanted a new intranet, or wanted a way to better connect with each other. And so again, our partners in the IT department, Nick Franson, Chad Burgo, and Lois Knudsen were very instrumental in helping us make that happen. And then we also, again, in working to integrate public safety, to show it's a model. It's not just police, it's not just fire. When you think of public safety, you think of safety of the community as a whole.
Now, previous to this clip, he talked about the creation of the stories to tell the city's story to the residents. And you heard here how, well, now they've expanded into selling trees and they have to do the intranet. I thought we had an IT department, which we do have, by the way, in Maplewood. We have an IT department and we have an IT department head. So exactly why the IT department head and the IT department isn't involved in creating that intranet versus the communications department doing it, I have no idea. But it sounds like a total duplication of efforts.
It sounds just like a whole hit and miss operation. Just who knows if they have any processes. It's just all like thrown in the air. And I think that's probably why everything up there costs so much money, because there really is no real order. One thing, the only thing they can pretty much all agree on that seems to be systematic is they do not want the public to really have any input or conversation into any of this. They've eliminated under Nora Salwick and Mary Abrams the ability to have public input at the meetings. They eliminated public access, so nobody can have any public comment anywhere on any sort of public access station, which had been around for 30 years. This bus rapid transit in Maplewood and Ramsey County is such a hot potato that they actually had to shut down all public comment and replace that with a communication department that says they do a good job meeting the goals, selling trees, whatever they sold, 100 or 150 trees, and they've done a good job keeping the public completely out of the conversation. And I think essentially, despite all these other things they're doing and all their strategies, their overwhelming big goal, if they would talk about it, is keeping the public's lips zipped.
And to keep the public from realizing and understanding that anybody else in the community has similar thoughts going in their minds.
And of course, that's the biggest thing, is to keep everybody divided. the way that government
And,
has
and isolated.
isolated,
back to that,
separated,
that-
and divided.
It goes back to that term
Right.
that the fellow said at the Rush Line Advisory Committee, that's one of the challenges, isolation. Well, we have resident isolation in
Right.
Maplewood. Everybody is isolated from everyone else. So unless you are actually talking to somebody over their fence, you don't know what they have to say or what they're thinking, because there is no public forum for the sharing of ideas.
And of course, the city of Maplewood would say our public forum is our Twitter page or our Facebook page. And of course, not only does that does not work, and they're not involved in it, but if you actually go to their Facebook page, there's nothing to be gained. They don't have the ability to update it. Same with their Twitter. They have everything. Seldom do they have anything, and it's basically stuff in the past congratulating themselves what a wonderful city they are by having kids being able to
Hug a truck.
Yeah, hug a truck event, a police car or a fire department car.
Right, yes, I know. I've always been puzzled by that Hug a Truck event. Yes, we're going to stick that on our Facebook and say what a great community we are because our kids got to hug a truck. Well, gee, that's great.
And what's shocking about that, their social messages are really pushed towards 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, not to the adults in the community who are actually paying the taxes and want to know what's going on at the city. You would think that that would be the job of the school district, to push stuff out and to educate the little kids,
Yeah.
the learners, little learners.
Good point, good point. Let's continue.
Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart
Okay, let's go to the
for
next.
saving my life, bringing me back.
Next.
One of the things council wants to talk a lot about is efficiencies and better techniques. A couple of the things we're doing is web streaming. Right now, we're working on a way, because we have a system called Tightrope. It's an integrated system that helps us broadcast the signal on channel 16. It also helps us program those boards you see out front. It also will help us webcast. We're close to migrating away from our current system, which will save us roughly $12,000 a year in that stream. Also, you guys, as we ramp up both video production and production on the website, and also with Public Works projects.
They have been promising us for the last 2 years that they're going to be ramping up their video productions. And yet, they also at the same time say that their video productions have to be shorter in length and that they have to do shorter and shorter video productions because the person who watches them on their Facebook only spends like 12 to 20 seconds watching their little video episodes on Facebook. And I would say, Mr. Berglund, that the reason people only watch some of those things only 12 to 20 seconds is because they've determined after 12 seconds there's nothing of value there to continue to watch.
Wow, now there you go. And I think people should go check it out, and you will see that there is nothing there to watch. It's all phony. It's all pointless.
Right.
It's like you want to tell the city, okay, you're spending all this money. You're partners with the county. You're spending all this money. Get a life and put something on there that's meaningful.
Right. Well, and here is the other thing that I heard in that last video, and that they're talking about efficiencies and that they're going to be doing web streaming, and this web streaming is going to save them $12,000 a year. Now, that's by having a third-party vendor do it. And yet our communications department costs $500,000 a year. So when Maplewood was using a third-party vendor at this $12,000 a year, they didn't have the communications department doing it, or they didn't even have a communications department. But they had to create a communications department at $500,000 annually so that they can now save $12,000. Now, what's wrong with that picture?
Well, you hit the nail smack dab in the middle. what a wild goose chase.
Well, let's hear what else they're going to invest in to save their efficiency, improve their efficiencies.
Drone is almost one of those givens. You have to have the drone shot in there, and it gets expensive when you do it for a third-party contractor. But we're working with Kevin. He's getting some training. He's on his way to taking the drone certification test, and that'll help us connect. And
Okay, so we're going to have this fellow in the communications department go and get drone training, so that way he can operate a drone, so that the 1 or 2 times a year that they need a satellite shot from above, that he can go out there, go get the drone, which I'm sure they're not going to rent. They got to buy a drone too, right? And they got to make sure they have all the equipment for it. So then, I bet you he has to have refresher drone classes too. If they're only doing a drone shot every few months, he's going to have to take refresher classes. He's going to have to practice on company time. Right. Otherwise, he's going to crash that drone, because that's what happens if you don't practice with your drones and in flying them, they crash. And then you got to go buy another one or repair it or something. So they're going to have their communications guy out there diddling around with drones just so they can get a couple of sky shots for a couple of their videos, because they don't want to pay a third-party vendor $1,500 or just get it off of Google Earth for free. They don't want to do that. And this is my prediction. You know what they're going to do next then, in order to justify all the investment in drones and the time and all of that, Mr. Berglund? They're going to implement it in their code compliance department. Because remember, on a previous news program, we had the film clip of the code enforcement officer reporting to the council that sometimes in doing his work to get his reports out there on the code non-compliance issues, that he actually had to go and look through the neighbor's bedroom windows.
Be doing.
Right.
The inspection process, once we get a complaint, we try to get out there the next, basically very quick, so the next couple of days from that. We go there, officers, so me or we have an intern right now, we go to the property and actually inspect it to see if everything is in order or if there's any violations of the property. This, again, is one of those interesting things where if we can't see it from the street, and residents don't allow us on their property, that tends to leave us with some issues in terms of actually enforcing that code. A lot of times, what that ends up being is we just call the resident that put in the initial complaint, and if they can see it from their property, they'll allow us access. So I've been in people's bedrooms, trying to see in their back neighbors, looking at the boat, and all sorts of places.
Now they won't have to ask the neighbor if they can go into their bedroom and look into the backyard of the neighbor.
Right.
All they got to do is ask the drone guy, hey, why don't you just go fly your drone over their backyard and snap a couple of shots? We'll say it's for a video that we're doing, but in the meantime, we're going to take a look at their backyard for code compliance issues.
And my question is, of course, and somebody would immediately, if they seen a drone flying over their backyard, and of course they'll probably go during the day when they're not home. What if people brought out their slingshot and knocked it down? Or what if they had drone fights? They had their drone fights up there and they tried to crash the other drone, the city's drone.
That's
Would
right.
that be... that would be illegal, I suppose.
I don't know. They'll have to have a new ordinance that says your drones cannot fight with our drones. That's I see it coming. It's the future. We're being visionary here. Bold. Let's see what else they have for the communications department.
communications. When I first got here, I was very, very hands-on. I wanted to make sure everything was getting done just right. And again, as Kevin and Chad kept working with department heads and people who were kind of across the board in the city, it's gotten to the point where we trust each other. They just kind of go ahead and do their thing, and we're able to take a set of hands out of the process. So it just helps really streamline things.
So, in other words, he was a micromanager. And so, what he's saying is that he's learned that he shouldn't do so much micromanaging, and that's part of the efficiencies, that he's just going to trust these dudes to go and do their job. However, I guess that's what he's got to do, since he's also been out there trying to sell trees. And we also heard, and we'll show this clip at the very end of the show, we also heard something else as to why maybe he had to do a little less micromanaging and being hands-on. Because you see, he's got less time now to spend with being hands-on, because as it turns out, the city is paying for him to get his master's degree. So he's saying that he's learned to be less of a micromanager, that he's trusting his employees that are underneath him. But in reality, maybe it's come to this end and this result not because he has actually changed his supervisory style, but because he's got less time. He's getting his master's at city expense. So
Well,
while
city
they're
expense
busy,
means taxpayers' expense.
that's right. So while the worker bees are doing their work
Their computer programming
and
or their
his
video
work
editing.
and doing their work, that's right, while they're doing their work and they're doing his work, he's busy studying his stuff for his master's. Okay, let's continue.
Challenges, as you know, we just signed a new PEG agreement with Comcast. Unfortunately, it represents about a $140,000 loss. We're hoping in the long term things trend back. But again, if you look at the trend, we will run into communications, some issues from budgeting and communications. Finance Director Paul Seth and myself are working through a plan to help backstop some of those losses. As we know, the franchise fee will be flat, but costs will continue to rise. Personnel costs will continue to rise. The costs of things we third-party contract for will continue to rise. We'll look for ways to control those costs, but those are some of the things we anticipate.
So costs are going to continue to rise. They've lost money, what they thought was going to be their big goose egg to pay for their communications department. And now they're trying to figure out where they're going to find that money. Well, we've reported that part of that new franchise agreement allows them to run advertising on their PEG channels. So I predict that the way that they are going to try to make money to cover up this gap of funding so that they can pay for their communications department is that they're going to sell advertising. And so then they'll have to hire somebody to go out and find advertising. So that'll be another salary. But they'll justify it because that person's going to bring in so much, and so that'll pay for their salary, plus bring in $20,000.
And of course, as you know, technology costs just keep going down. Technology continues to become more user-friendly. Now the city, if they wanted to, like many other cities, in a lot of school districts, including 622 School District, Stillwater School District, the United States House of Representatives, the United States Senate, all streams for free through YouTube. So costs, instead of, costs are going to continue to rise, and then he says personnel costs, meaning his salary, we all know that costs should be dramatically going down with all the ways of doing things. So the question is, why is his salary rising 90, 100,000, more and more and more, when technology is getting cheaper? Actually, they should be able to make budget cuts in their department. And those savings, if they want to grab all the savings that the technology affords them and put it in more in their salary, okay. But to say that stuff is going, technology costs are going up, I'm not quite sure if people are going to buy into that scam, because a lot of things are doing with the city, whether it's social media, whether it's YouTube, whether it's all kinds of ways that they could have communicating, are going drastically down or zero.
Right. Well, their costs are going up. Let's continue.
Short term, we're in good shape. We have money set aside to do some of the capital infrastructure that we'd like to do to modernize the communications within the city. But in the long term, that 10-year trend, it's there. Right now, we're in front of the wave. We have a way to position ourselves well so we can ride the wave in without it tipping us over.
So they have money set aside to do these technology upgrades and to modernize what at City Hall? They just had new microphones put in, which you hear oftentimes on these programs when we're using the film footage, that their microphones aren't working.
And of course, not only, even in the bigger picture, that's at odds with, they have all this new free fiber optic cable provided by Comcast, of course paid for by all the other rate subscribers. They have all these new cameras up at City Hall. They have all these new monitors up at City Hall. All this is installed. All their computer system is the top of the line, despite having all these people who are techophytes, or people who are not that interested in technology. They have the best of the community of anybody, and they get it for free. Either this high-speed internet from Comcast, all this stuff, all the residents who paid the bill don't get to use, and yet they say, despite having everything new, we still have all these additional capital costs. Notice, he didn't give one example of what that would be.
Right. And these new upgrades, whether or not if it's the monitors, the microphones, the cameras, have all been in the last 3 years and paid for through the fees collected from the Maplewood Comcast subscribers. That's who paid for them.
But I guess the one thing they maybe are going to find a way to pay for these costs are the drones, because maybe they're not just buying one drone. Maybe they need a whole fleet of drones, because they occasionally need a shot, an overhead shot, to put in their, according to him, their YouTube video, which nobody's watching because it's so pointless.
Yes, maybe that is the new technology they need, a fleet of drones. Let's continue with his presentation.
For 2020. I want to thank Councilmember Smith for helping us guide this discussion at our retreat a couple of weeks back, and for all the input from the team. What we want to do is focus in on 3 things that we do really well as a city, things that we have and we do best that other people don't do as well. That is, have outdoor amenities in an inner ring suburb. We want to innovate, and we want to be a responsible government, which a lot are, but if you look at some of these meetings and look what we're doing, I think we have some comparative advantage there. And we also have a diversity of housing stock, and I'll get into all these in a second.
I would ask that we put that back up, because he switched in the middle of his presentation the context of what he was talking about. He said that Maplewood has that diversity of the outdoor environment. That's like the parks, the trails.
Well, we don't know for sure what he's talking about, outdoor amenity.
If we give him the benefit of the doubt, we're gauging that that's parks, that is the trails. But then he says, we want to be innovative and responsive. He doesn't say Maplewood is innovative or responsive. He says we want to be. And that's a different context than the first example. So when he's saying this is what we're going to focus on, he makes it sound like we're going to focus on what makes us stronger, what our assets are. Well, certainly outdoor amenities is one of those items. But wanting to be innovative and wanting to be responsive, that's just aspirational. That's not reality. And then he moves on to diversity in housing. Well, Maplewood does have diversity in housing. So you see how he interjected one of these focus points as something that they really don't have at all, but just something they want to promote so people think they are innovative and think that they're responsive. And
Yeah.
that's the point of a media department, a PR department, is to put the gloss on it.
They've actually thrown innovation under the bus, and along with responsiveness, because in the past, and just 5 years ago, actually people could engage their city hall, tried to engage city hall in any form, either during the week or at a public, just a regular public city council grassroots meeting. It's all phony. It's all non-responsive. That's actually a false statement. The city has made no indication. They have no plan. They have no goal. They have no strategy to be responsive. That's just an outright prevarication. And innovation, that is a false concept too. Innovation, the city of Maplewood is going to go back to, along with Ramsey County, is going to spend close to $1 billion to build a bus rapid transit route, which is slower than the buses. That's not going forward, that's going backwards. That's not innovation. That is precisely the opposite of innovation. Innovation would be forming apps that people could get, maybe a car or an Uber or some way that people could get away from driving a car. Putting a bus rapid transit down there is already a failed system with their bus route that nobody wants to take, and the only people who are taking the bus in Maplewood is because they have no other option, because it's the slowest, most backward, most cumbersome way to have transportation in your community. So innovation, please.
Well, let's continue with our next clip.
Means that when my sort of charge for both myself, Kevin, and Chad going forward is when we tell stories, when we put stuff on the web, when we pitch things to the media, does it answer one of those three questions? How does our story best fit in those three story columns to really make sure we're focused on what types of stories we're telling?
This is now where we get back to the story. Where does our pitch to the media fall within these story columns? You heard him say his pitch
Yes.
to the media, and that these are story columns. So we've got the story column of our outdoor amenities. Oh, by the way, one of the greatest outdoor amenities Maplewood has is the Bruce Vento Ecological Trail, which is now going to be decimated and is going to be a concrete freeway. There you go. Now there's a soundbite for you. We have the other story column is that Maplewood wants to be innovative. Maplewood wants to be responsive. However, we can't think of any way how to be responsive or innovative. It simply escapes us. And then lastly, we're going to pitch to the media the diversity of our housing that we have, and yet all of our newest projects going up are all voucher housing. There's no diversity in that.
And of course, I believe they can pitch anything they want to the media because, first of all, fewer and fewer people are reading the newspaper, the Pioneer Press. So pitch all day you want and make up all kinds of phony and stories. People have already made their decision that it's not even it's not only is the Pioneer Press has a real problem with the way they the rates and how they seduce people, but they're not even interested in the content of the Pioneer Press for a large section of the public. And as far as the TV stations, pitch all you want to your former employees or your buddies what they want, because why do people watch TV news? They don't want to watch it because they're saying City Hall says it's a bed of roses, and despite everything, all the property taxes and crime is going up, and you have all these worthless projects, they really have their heart up at City Hall for your interest. People don't watch local news, whether on 4, 5, 9, or 11. They watch it because they want to know what crime is going on in their cities. And of course, Maplewood is trying to hide all the crime. So instead of pitching stuff to the media, Maplewood is more interested in covering up the crime, which is escalating in Maplewood.
Right. In other words, the viewers would be more interested in listening to an investigative report about the crime statistics in Maplewood that Maplewood isn't disclosing.
Well, they would be more interested in actually going to the crime scene, because that's what everybody is always watching
but,
over.
right, but the viewers.
The viewers would be interested in that.
Right. But the reporters would be interested in the crime scene. Yes.
Right.
Okay, on to our next clip.
Other goals in 2020 is a web upgrade. This is a big deal. We spent most of 2018 really diving in. How do people use our website? Where are they going? What pages are they looking at? How do they get there? How long do they spend on the page? So with that in mind, that's going to help design what our website looks like in the future.
Wow. They spent most of 2018 doing a deep dive into who's using their website, what pages they're going to, and looking at, how people use the internet to look at the website of the city. I think that anybody who's got a web page, that the company that hosts your web page gives you those statistics, and all you got to do is spend 10 minutes every couple days to review them, and it doesn't take a whole year to do a deep dive into that.
This sounds like complete crazy and goofy talk. It sounds like there's a swamp that needs to be drained up there at City Hall.
Well, it sounds like he's telling a story and pitching his marketing messages onto the city council to see how well it flies. And if it flies by them, it must be good.
And I can't believe, even despite the crazy city council where 3 of the 5 aren't elected and there's huge issues up in Maplewood, I can't even believe these people buy any of that.
Thanks to some software innovations, we're able to not only stay compliant, but know where we need to be compliant going into the future, and that'll be a big piece of the redesign. And again, we want to have the user in mind. I think we're kind of ahead of this curve in a lot of ways because we've learned from so many other folks, and we've seen when other cities have redone their web pages.
He says that they've been ahead of a lot of other cities with regard to being user-friendly, and yet we have shown film footage in the past where even appointed Mayor Marley Abrams is busy complaining at open city council meetings about how unuser-friendly the Maplewood website is. And this whole issue about being ADA compliant, if they weren't doing this in-house and they had a third-party vendor doing this for them, that this was their business of creating and doing websites, that third-party vendor would have a duty to know what the ADA compliance rules and laws are. And they would ensure that it was being done, rather than having it being in-house by a bunch of greenhorns who don't know what it is. And so they are learning on the taxpayer dime, and of course they're not going to have their city attorney working on this issue at the rates that he charges, heaven forbid. So that's another thing. In 2018, keep in mind, this is 2019, it's August. They've been doing a deeper dive into their ADA compliance issues. Wow.
And of course, the website is anything but user friendly. If you try for yourself, once in a blue moon, you may be able to find something which you're looking for and searching for. But good luck. You're better off to just go to Google and try to find it that way, because in my mind, it's actually using it quite a bit, it's one of the worst websites you can actually go to. And I don't actually know how something as such a small city of Maplewood can have such huge user-friendly issues with a simple website.
And this is the product of the communications department.
Timeline here, right now we're working with each of the departments. We've kind of gone in and shown each of the departments how they're using the sites, which pages on their site are the most popular, which are the least popular. How can we make some of the stuff that's clutter go away? And how can we make sure that those sites that the community is going to and engaging with are as engaging as possible? In July, we're going to start looking at designs, what this thing looks like. August, we'll start to do content migration, meaning essentially it's like when you move, right? You're not going to move all your junk into the new house and then get rid of it. You want to make sure all the junk is gone first, so when you move to the new house, it's nice and clean.
It sounds like he's giving us advice for the city council, that when you move into a new house, you get rid of all the junk. So in the next election that's coming up, not this fall, but the next fall, 2020, there will be 2 council members who are currently appointed that will be up for re-election, or actually election, not re-election. They'll call it re-election, but they were appointed. So it'll be election. The appointed mayor, she will be up for election. One of the council members who gave themselves an extra 5th year on the council by voting for the ordinance for an extra year, he will be up for election. So you see, in 2020, it will be time to do a migration up at City Hall with regard to the city council seats. So just as Joe Sheeran says, that when you move into the new house, you make sure you keep all your old junk behind and you bring the new stuff in. Well, that's what we need to do up at Maplewood City Hall, is that in 2020, do a new migration to the council bench. Keep the old stuff off in the old house. Leave it there. And then start fresh and clean all over again.
And of course, I think he's on the edge of maybe another metaphor where he's talking about these other administrative staff members that he's maybe not getting along with. Is we gotta rework this structure up here. The web page is a metaphor for their administrative structure, and get rid of the junk when we get our new chain of command structure. And I don't know if he's taking a direct shot at Melinda Coleman or not. You can almost imagine that.
I mean, certainly he's involved with selling these trees. Why isn't the Nature Center doing that? Good question. Good question. Let's continue.
We'll start the test runs, and hopefully we're going to launch by November, December. A lot of this is dependent on Civic Plus, who's our service provider on this one, and then where we are in the queue. And again,
And what I noticed is that just yesterday I got a batch of emails all saying to me that I was unsubscribed from all of their different lists that they have that I subscribe to. And I was wondering, why was I kicked off of all those? Well, this is because it coincides coincidentally with their data migration. So instead of migrating the fact that I am signed up for all these listservs, their system kicked me off and unsubscribed me. So I had to go back and resubscribe to all of them. So that's part of the bugs of their migration that's currently underway in August and September. So for any of you who are signed up or thought you were signed up to any of their listservs or their group notifications for whether or not if it's public works or events at the nature center or city council meetings or any of those kind of updates, double check and make sure that you still are subscribed. Or, like me, you might have been booted off of all of them just automatically as part of this migration, and you have to go back and resubscribe.
And doesn't it sound like the boys, and we should say the boys in the technology part are just dinking around? Because you'll notice there's no women in the technology department, and they're just, when they're fooling around, they're just making a mess of everything.
And in between all of that, they'll be out in the back parking lot playing with the drones.
And launching. And you notice they use that word launching the drones to conduct their spy operation. Or send their missiles, I guess.
Yes. Well, when I was a kid, we had those little rockets,
Right.
that you constructed them and then you shot them off. Lots of fun. Well, drones have replaced those. So let's continue.
2020 goals, more purposeful traditional media outreach. So we want to make sure that a lot of the stuff that we do gets seen internally, and we're good at putting stuff on Facebook. But how do we work with our partners in the local media, whether it's Channel 5, Channel 4, Pioneer Press, or some of our specialty newspapers? How are we taking those stories, again, that fit in those 3 story columns, and we're doing those special pushes? So I'm going to do more purposeful traditional media outreach.
He's talking about pitching the city's stories to the commercial media, and he calls them partners. Now, when I grew up, it was thought that the media were actually supposed to be the watchdogs to hold government accountable. That's the value that I grew up with. That's what I always thought was the role of the media, was to dig out the stories and hold people in government accountable, not to be their partner and say, oh, thank you for putting this little story together about one of your story columns to tell us how innovative you want to be. Oh, we'll get that on the news airwaves right away for you.
Well,
There's something perverted about this.
Well, and this really, it sounds like what his big operation is he wants to have the communication boys put together some videos with some drone shots so that he can pitch it to his partners over at the commercial TV stations, so they'll run the YouTube video on their nightly news.
Now that would be innovative. Certainly an aspirational goal. Well, let's take a look at this last one, because he's talking about focusing on public safety and communicating public safety to the residents. Now, this sounds like something very important. Let's take a look.
Continue working with public safety on sort of a broader plan. As you saw in other presentations, public safety had their annual report. We were part of putting that annual report together. How do we do that annual report in the next year so that it's even more user-friendly for citizens?
So this public safety media plan doesn't have anything to do with public safety and the public. It has to do with their budgetary plan. Why not have information on how to do CPR, for instance, on how to best make a 911 call under stress?
Or to do what they had 2 or 3 years ago, you could see what crime was going on in your neighborhood, how many car thefts there was, how many burglaries
And have the
there was.
reports.
Yeah, up on the website.
And
they pulled those off. Again, Maplewood going backwards. And of course, using social media, they just had the big shooting over there on 400 McKnight Road at Maplewood Ponds. Did they communicate with the public what was going on? Why was everybody shooting everybody up?
Right. So you see, his idea about a public safety media plan is totally different than the proper type of public safety media plan for communicating with the residents of the community about public safety issues. Now, I want to thank you, Mr. Berglund, for being here for our program today.
Thanks for having me.
And viewers, thank you for tuning in. We're going to end up the show with, well, that clip I promised you where it says that Joe Sheeran is having his master's degree paid for by the city of Maplewood, and also some other thoughts he has on his communications department and how they are going to tell the stories of the Maplewood government. Bye-bye.
We want to work on his professional development. For Chad, he's pretty instrumental in doing the handouts, the flyers, the visual stuff. And because we know those visual pieces are so important, we're going to work on getting him some visual design, advanced classes, some advanced photography, and some Adobe is the suite of software we use to both cut video and to make the handouts and the one-pagers. For Kevin, drone operation, photography, and then story production. I think when Kevin came here, he was really good at going out and getting his shots, but when he came back, maybe not having the message. So for him, he's gotten really better over the last 2 years at messaging. And then for me, I'm finishing up a master's degree, and I'd like to get some more leadership training. So.
I believe we will move on to the mayoral vacancy. So for this process, we will begin by accepting nominations from the council. We'll have a discussion, meaning each person who's interested in being mayor will give some comments, a time for question and answer, and then we'll move on to making a decision. Fair enough? Excellent. Do we have a preference on, well, first we'll need to make nominations. And it is okay to nominate ourselves.
I verified that. I'm going to nominate myself for the appointment of mayor.
Excellent. And seconds are not needed here. And I will nominate myself for the appointment of mayor.
Thanks, guys.
You want to make it three of a kind?
No.
All right.
Absolutely not.
Excellent.
Now I have to look at the attorney. What do we do next? Whatever you like. Well, we had 2 nominations, so, and I'm not the chair here, so how do we handle this, sir?
Yeah, so we,
Why don't we ask
Do you
Mr.
have-
Beatty?
Well, I think unless there's more discussion, it's time to vote.
now the question is how we want to handle voting. I think we should all 3 vote. If you are statutorily precluded for voting from yourself, you may want to consider another vote. So if we vote for each other, that cancels it out.
Right,
The only,
all boils
the
down
only
to. Is that what
issue.
you're trying to
right,
say?
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
The only, let's do it this way. Let's go this way. If Mary Lee abstains, I'll abstain. If Mary Lee votes for me, I'll vote for Mary Lee.
Okay.
Brian, I'll vote for you.
Mary Lee, I'd be happy to vote for you.
Okay. Kathleen?
It's gonna,
You know, why do I sit with these people? Can anybody tell me? I vote for Mary Lee.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. And we are not elected to make easy decisions.
Well,
So,
you think I'd know that by now, wouldn't you?
yeah. Congratulations, Mary Lee.